The stages of listening to Boise State Public Radio podcasts. Step 1, testing the waters. You tune into an episode or two. Nothing too serious. Step 2, you got a little hooked on one of those series like Extremely American or Scandalized, and now you're binging. No judgment, but you did listen to it in one day. Step 3, now you're subscribed to a feed. You get notifications to your phone every time there's a new daily episode of The Connector or Idaho Matters. I see where this is going. Step 4, you realize how much time you're spending with Boise State Public Radio podcasts and the fact that it doesn't cost you a dime. Step 5, you decide to step up and support your podcast listening because you can, because you want to, not because you have to. All right, now's the time, you podcast fan you. Go to boisestatepublicradio.org and click donate to support your love of Boise State Public Radio podcast listening today.
From Boise State Public Radio, this is The Connector. It's Idaho's daily news. Good morning. I'm George Prentice. Today, we absolutely have to talk about what you'll be dealing with in your commute and the weather for the next few days. We'll check in with the Weather Service. We'll talk about a big pushback from University of Idaho professors who say, no, do not cut our DEI programs at the U of I. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments concerning Idaho's nearly total ban on abortions. And we'll tell you about a significant blow to that proposed merger between Albertsons and Kroger. It is Wednesday, the 11th of December, and here come today's stories. Josh Smith is over at the National Weather Service office in Boise, and yes, he says morning commuters will have another challenging ride in this morning.
Yes, they will. We're going to experience that continued fog and stratus during the commute this morning. They may also see a little bit of snow. We've seen some light snow in a few spots, so definitely look out for some snow, maybe some ice patches this morning.
And indeed, the temperature will be cold enough for the possibility of black ice, yes?
Yes, it will be. We're looking to be in the mid to upper 20s, so yes.
Okay, so what is the overall forecast say for today and tomorrow?
It's today here in the Boise area. It's going to be very similar to yesterday. Might be high 29 to 30 degrees. I don't know that we're going to see any sun today as that inversion remains in place. So not much change from yesterday. And
does this wash out?
Unfortunately, not yet.
Okay.
We're going to see a little weak system tomorrow, but we don't think it's going to be enough to break the inversion. Better chance of that on Saturday.
Okay.
We're going to get a much stronger system, and that's going to bring some rain to the valley.
Okay, so rain in the valley. I'm guessing snow in the mountains, though, right?
Correct, yes. Snow in the mountains, rain here in the valley, and that should help break the inversion, and we've got temperatures close to 42, 43 degrees.
Okay, but a change in our air quality, yeah?
Absolutely. Once we can get rid of that inversion, push out all the smoke or all the stratus and fog, should help with the air quality.
Josh Smith at the National Weather Service office in Boise. 1 week after the executive director of the State Board of Education told Idaho lawmakers that the board would soon be proposing resolutions to restrict diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in Idaho public schools, the Faculty Senate at the University of Idaho is pushing back. Yesterday, the U of I Faculty Senate voted to pass its own resolution supporting diversity on campus and expressing concerns about those proposals from the State Board of Ed. U of I Professor Deborah Thorne said her fellow professors needed to voice their concern over the direction of the Board of Ed in its challenge of programs that Thorne said are valued by students and teachers. Meanwhile, the U of I student newspaper, The Argonaut, says the Associated Students of the U of I passed their own resolution asking Idaho lawmakers to not cut DEI programs. On Tuesday, state and federal judges separately ruled that nearly $25 billion proposed merger between Albertsons and Kroger violates antitrust and consumer protection laws. Troy Oppie reports.
The merger, proposed in 2022, would be the largest ever between grocers, but federal judge Adrian Nelson ruled that the Federal Trade Commission's arguments against the merger would likely prevail at trial and issued a temporary injunction blocking the deal. In her opinion, Nelson sided with the FTC over concerns of the long-term viability of a third-party company, C&S Wholesale Grocers, which would buy nearly 600 stores spun off in an effort to satisfy regulators. C&S has an unsuccessful history as a larger retail grocer, the ruling noted. Kroger and Albertsons argued they needed to merge to remain viable against larger competition like Costco, Walmart, and Amazon. And Albertsons has said it could be forced to reduce locations if the merger fails. But Nelson wrote that the private competition interests were not enough to outweigh antitrust law. In Washington state, a Superior Court judge ruled the merger violates that state's consumer protection law, with similar concerns over the spun-off stores, and noting that operating efficiencies Kroger says it can achieve in the merger were not enough to cover the $1 billion in cost savings the company promised to deliver to consumers. That court permanently blocked the proposed merger in Washington state. Albertsons, in a statement, called the federal ruling disappointing and says it's evaluating its options. Troy Oppie, Boise State Public Radio News.
The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals heard arguments Tuesday in a lawsuit brought against the state of Idaho by the federal government. The case centers around whether or not the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, or EMTALA, conflicts with the nearly total ban of abortions in Idaho. Julie Lucatau reports.
EMTALA requires hospitals that receive federal funds to provide stabilizing care, which plaintiffs say can include abortions. But Idaho prohibits abortions in most cases, with exceptions for rape, incest, or when the life of the mother is in danger. The state appealed an injunction preventing the ban from applying to emergency situations, asking it to be lifted while the case continues to make its way through the court. Speaking on behalf of Idaho, Attorney John Bursch said the federal government could not preempt state law by paying private parties to violate it.
When you consider the irreparable harm to Idaho of having its law enjoined every day, as well as to the harm to mothers and unborn children who are not being protected the way Idaho's law intends, I don't think we can afford to delay to go back to the district court.
U.S. Attorney for the plaintiffs, Catherine Carroll, said EMTALA does not conflict with state law in most cases, but
the definition of stabilizing care and the obligation to provide it are not defined by reference to state law. They're defined by reference to the physician in the hospital's reasonable medical judgment.
Each side was given roughly 30 minutes to make their case, while judges asked clarifying questions. The court did not immediately issue a ruling. Julie Duguetta, Boise State Public Radio News.
And that is today's episode of The Connector. I'm George Prentice. I'll see you back here on Thursday. We do want to remind you that The Connector, like all of our content at Boise State Public Radio, comes to you as a listener-funded service. So if you have it in your heart, if you could possibly go to boisestatepublicradio.org and maybe give a gift of $1 a week, you help make The Connector happen. For even considering that, thank you. And if you do that, oh my goodness, thank you, thank you. And for now, thanks for listening.
We could all use a little help navigating the news these days. The Consider This podcast wants to give you a hand. 6 days a week, we'll help you make sense of the day's biggest news story and what it means for you in less than 15 minutes. Listen now to the Consider This podcast from NPR.